in this installment, I'm really just going to talk about my relation to Star Wars, how I got involved with Star Wars, my first encounter with anything related to Star Wars, when I first even heard of Star Wars, and why Star Wars means so much to me, why I'm so particular on how the characters are treated, how the franchise is treated, etc., etc. Alright guys, so the first thing I'd like to talk about is just how I first encountered Star Wars out of the blue, when, coming from a place where never heard of a Star Wars, there was no such thing as Star Wars, no one ever heard of a Star Wars. Let's just talk about where I was, what I was doing, just how I first came to learn about Star Wars. And I just happened to be at home, just having breakfast. The TV was on. I think the volume wasn't even turned up, and I just happened to glance over, and on the TV there were these images of these spacecrafts, these little fighting type spacecrafts, which later learned they were TIE fighters. They were in space, flying around, and then we had Luke Skywalker on the Millennium Falcon sitting in that little bombardier's bay with the laser cannon, with that seat that was like rotating around and gyrating and everything, and he was shooting the fighters, and he was all excited. Do you remember that scene? And he blew up a couple of them. I think he was just learning the Force and stuff like that. That was the little clip that was shown on the TV. Now, frankly, had no idea what this was. How could I know what this was? I'm thinking, what is this? Is this? I was turned on to like the morning, the morning show where they talk about the news and have guests and things like that. So I said, well, it's nothing like I've ever seen. It's not like a television series that I know about. It wasn't from any kind of movie I know about. So yeah, I turned up the volume, and at the time it was probably like a little press junket with Mark Hamill, and that was probably the little clip that he showed, and he was explaining, this is my new film. It's called Star Wars, and I play a kid, blah blah blah, and we're very excited about the film. And then the interviewer was asking me a few questions about it, and it just seemed very, very intriguing. And I've never seen any kind of thing where people were shooting at flying crafts. I've never seen that before. So obviously it was very intriguing and caught my interest. But it wasn't like, oh, I gotta rush out and see this. It just, lodged in my mind that this was a very intriguing film. And so the movie probably opened within a few days after that. And I said, oh yeah, that's that movie Star Wars that they was talking about on the morning show. And the thing about it was that the news coverage was outside a theater where they had lines that were stretched all over the place, stretched around the block, and they had the news cameras interviewing people. Why are you here? What's going on? And so, oh yeah, we're here to see Star Wars, and oh man, it's awesome, and I'm seeing it for the third and fourth time, blah blah blah. And I'm thinking, that's that same movie that I saw a little piece of earlier, and this thing must be like, I think I want to see this. I think I should check it out. So I went to see the movie, and I'll talk about my reaction to it probably another time. But obviously the movie was fantastic. It was mind-boggling. Everything in it, you've really never seen before. It was funny. You had different characters. I mean, think about it. If you think about the core people, you know, Luke Skywalker, Han Solo, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Princess Leia, the R2-D2, C-3PO. Because if you think of Chewbacca, they are the most dissimilar people you could possibly imagine. They are just they couldn't be more different from one another. They couldn't be more different from one another. Yet they were all thrown together, you know, on basically a mission, pretty much. And it was funny. It worked. You had lightsabers. You had fighting. Special effects that you've never seen before in your entire lifetime. So it was just a fantastic experience. And so if you try to put this in perspective of what this thing was, you have to realize that it was just simply a life-altering experience, especially if you were watching movies for a long time. No other movie really was ever like this. And for anyone to grasp the true impact of the movie, I think you have to put it in perspective of the whole history of movies and blockbusters and going to the movies, because a lot of this would have an impact on just how there was so much of a phenomenon and hysteria attached to the movie. All right, so now let's talk about why was this movie so special, so different. I mean, today you talk about something happening in space and a lightsaber or a laser. We've a space fight. We've seen that all before. So why would that type of movie be so dramatic, so mind-boggling, and all that type of stuff? Well, I mean, first of all, you have to understand that there was really no other movie like this in 1977. There were no movies dealing with space battles and all that type of thing in 1977. Let's put this in perspective. If you were to say, you know, so when it come out, what could you compare it to? Like when, you know, we have a tendency to compare movies to one another, or sort of combine it. But a movie like Star Wars, there was really almost nothing to compare it, because Star Wars turned out really to be the prototype of the space fantasy, space epic, space western, space opera, was sort of the prototype movie for that. So it was almost beyond comparison. And so the only relevant comparisons you can make, and I'm going back, you know, back in 1977, when I said to myself, what is this like? What could this possibly be? What is the closest thing I could compare this to? Well, I mean, you'd have to go back to, I'll give you some examples. You'd have to go back to Stanley Kubrick's 2001 Space Odyssey, because that was really probably the closest film visually you might compare Star Wars with. This very massive, highly technical, futuristic, special effects laden film. Okay, now mind you, that movie came out in '68, so that was a good 9 years earlier. Okay, so it wasn't close to it, but you have to go back and search for any movie that you could really compare it to. And even 2001 wasn't, you know, an actiony, villainy, comic book type movie. It was very serious, very philosophical, existential, and a lot of things. So obviously it's a big difference, but that's the only really close comparison you could make. There's also the movie Barbarella, with Jane Fonda, also came out in 1968, which is, you know, another spacey movie, but again, that was very campy. Didn't deal with, you know, weaponry, very beyond comparison. But I tried to search up movies that might have some kind of compelling space theme to it, and I have to go back to like almost 10 years before to find anything of comparison. Now you might think that, yeah, but wasn't there Star Trek? I mean, Star Trek was around, wasn't it? Well, Star Trek was around from 66 to 69 on TV, American TV. So that was quite a while before Star Wars in 77. They weren't really in the same ballpark. But again, that's almost the closest thing that you can kind of draw into it. Now you're going to say, yeah, it was in 69, but they were showing reruns for years and years thereafter. That's true. But still, in 66 through 69, you're dealing with very primitive special effects. There was nothing like what you saw in Star Wars. It's almost a non-comparison. The only thing they had in common was that they was both in space, but beyond that is really a whole different vibe. Now think about it. If you think about like the quote-unquote battle sequences in Star Trek, they didn't have TIE fighters or X-Wings or any small mobile flying crafts, where they didn't have any dogfights, never had any kind of dogfights, didn't have any battles with laser weapons or anything like that. There just wasn't the film technology, special effects technology to depict something like that, to stage those types of things. When you think about it, whenever the Enterprise was in a quote-unquote space battle with another Klingon ship or Romulan ship or whoever's ship, they weren't in any kind of dogfight. They were literally looking at each other through television screens, talking to one another, all during the fight, threatening each other, bullying each other, give us back our thing and we're going to blow you out of the sky, this and that and the other. And even when they were fighting, they were still facing each other. That was the extent of a fight. Okay, no fighters, no dogfights, nothing like that. So all that was totally new. That had not been done before for a number of reasons, but mostly just from a special effects point of view. But having said that, there really was a void in filmmaking with regards to that type of space fantasy, those types of elements. I mean, if you think beyond just the technicalities of the Force and lightsabers and X-Wings and all this type of stuff, at the end of the day, this is a man that had a very complicated relationship with his sister. Very complicated. And even a more complicated relationship with his father. Deeply complicated. And I challenge anyone out there watching this to suggest that they themselves can't relate to having a deeply complicated relationship with your sibling or with your father in some way. And if you do, then that makes Luke Skywalker even that more relatable, because we all see a part of ourselves as young men to another in Luke Skywalker, and that's why when something is done with his character, we take it very personally. And yes, I just took it very personally, what they do with him, I'll go into that perhaps more when I do my formal review, but I'm just setting it up kind of why I'm so disappointed with the movie on that level. Alright guys, so I think I've pretty much covered everything I want to get out of this installment, talking about really Star Wars, sort of its place in history, why it was so popular, the impact it had on the world, the impact it had on us as young men or women, how we grew up with it. If you didn't see it in a theater, you probably saw it some other way. Let's not forget, there's a lot of people who just weren't around, weren't born in 1977, who really don't have a personal investment in all these happenings that happened in 1977. Most of the movie-going public, let's face it, is probably in that 15 to 25-year-old age group, and of course they weren't born yet, and therefore a lot of them were seeing Star Wars, on DVD or in daycare or on TV or cable or something like that. So they would have absolutely no relation to what was going on in 1977, the impact of seeing it in theaters, the impact of seeing it with your dad or anything like that. I'd like to thank you for visiting my channel and being part of my first video experience. Also, I'd like to again invite you to subscribe, and thereby you're hooked into and linked to the future installments. Thank you for being patient and following this presentation. Hope you liked it, and look forward to seeing you again in the very near future. Bye bye.